Good morning. It is Wednesday, December 4th. And we continue with Etgar Keret's The 7 Good Years. We're having a few offline discussions here about Nobody Wants This. And Rabbi Sarat and I are thinking about doing a class about it. And I will take on those men.
So go back and read the intro. It's about entertainment in general and comedy and women,
right,
and how they're depicted traditionally.
Yeah, but that's all how men take it in. You know, Joan Rivers, if she had been a man, you wouldn't have said anything about it, not one thing. And people,
there's always been a truth stand.
Exactly. Barb, you're real loud.
All of you are totally ruining this for me.
Oh,
I was looking for something after the election.
Yeah.
Completely mindless, that I could just watch and not judge and not decipher and not.
I loved it.
And
Obviously, don't watch this.
No, I did. I watched it.
You did?
It fit the bill. It was.
Barb, did you like it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, but it was, to me, it was kind of mindless and just, it fit the bill for the time.
Okay.
I would like to hear what the rabbi has to say about it.
I don't think he's watched it yet.
Well, I'm sure
Full transparency.
Yeah, I know that. You had said that before when we discussed it.
Yeah,
But I think that would be cool to have
yeah.
his
Yes.
point of view.
Right, you could have, his point, my point.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we're on to Defender of the People. No, strange bedfellows.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about,
Page, if you're in the book, page 28.
Mary,
Mary.
stop.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are, he's on the airplane, he's going to Bali. The whole thing with the airplane and getting stuck with someone who is talking to you. And that is
Can't you relate to that?
yeah.
I can.
Yeah. Kind of going on and on and on and on and on about it. I had to look up where New Caledonia was.
Oh, it's in the
And
Pacific.
whenever I see the air conditioners in the rooms didn't work, that's like, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah. The thing that I thought, and then the lizard in the room,
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
and he's like, oh, it's a lizard. Don't worry about that. And, but this is on the top of page 31. I thought this was summed up a lot. When I ask him if he thinks there's a moral to his story, he says he's sure there must be, but he doesn't know exactly what it is. Maybe, he said, after a short pause, is that this world is full of lizards, even though there's nothing we can do about it. It is always helpful to find out how big they are. And that resonated with me. Lynn, go ahead and then I'll tell you why.
I was trying to find connection among the 4 stories. And this sort of started me out here about what's present in our life.
Yes.
It could be anything from an annoyance to Donald Trump, I mean, the lizards are those dangers, those annoyances, those
Disruptors.
disruptors in our society.
Yeah.
And
Can you guys hear Lynn?
Yes, yes.
Good answer.
and I think in every story, there's a sense of hopelessness, helplessness, loss of choice in our life of what we can do about these lizards. The power and status of those who are higher than we are. I mean, there's a lot. And another theme I'd like to pursue is this idea of priorities in our life. particularly the guy who said I should be on the beach with my wife instead of going to this senseless.
Yes, also that was very poignant.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the lizards. For me, working in a synagogue, a lizard is when someone calls and complains about, I mean, they don't complain to me anymore. They complain to Ashley, but listen, what's going on in the classroom is terrible. And you're like, and of course, my first reaction was like the hotel guy. Oh, and that's, we always and they're actually standing on the tables and hanging from the chandeliers. So I think as someone in customer service or, here, when people say X, we tend to roll over it, but we really need to go into the room and see if there's a 5-foot lizard in there and not, I'm sure he thought it was one of those, cute little geckos or whatever we see on television, not a 5-foot. Yes, Lynn and then Barb. Mary.
I was gonna say Ruth.
That's okay.
All right. This idea of assumptions we make, assumptions and stereotypical responses to things. And you just said something where you said, oh, it's going to be, she's over exaggerating or what. We do that all the time in life and make assumptions about people without getting the facts. And then when we do get the facts, we're in a situation of how do we deal with that? And that is something else I'd like to discuss today too.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's,
Assumptions even the author makes
Yes.
about.
I totally agree. Barb, then Elaine.
I was struck in reading this about how much this reminded me of Kafka's Metamorphosis. Because, he has this person who turns into a bug and Keret keeps talking about how he's traveling and how he's a little bit paranoid about the anti-Semitism,
Right.
about how people view him all the time. And at the end of the story, he imagines himself the lizard. He turns into the lizard. They also talk about in these stories, how they're related. There's just paraphrasing here. They talk about how the diaspora disappears in Israel. There's no, when you're out of Israel, you are living with your history of the Holocaust. You're living with,
Right.
Are these people in this little town? Do they view me as a lizard? Or, as a Moses with horns or whatever. And so you have Kafka on one hand who wrote all his stuff before the Holocaust and died. And you have this guy who's living after the Holocaust.
And his parents are Holocaust survivors.
His parents are Holocaust survivors. So I think they're both experiencing the anti-Semitism of their times.
Yeah,
I think it's an excellent point.
This is all.
right. Elaine.
Okay, I think women of my generation were put aside with, oh, don't worry. It's fine, darling. We'll take care of it. And I think that a man would never say that to another man. They would address the issue. This goes back to even the movie. And I remember going to doctors and they were, oh, darling, I had terrible migraine. Oh, we'll give you Valium or something. And just pat you on the head and dismiss you. So I think that maybe my grandchildren's generation are not being dismissed. These girls all have their focus on who they are and what they are.
They are also going to women doctors.
Yes, yes.
And there's article after article that doctors in general, probably men and women, don't listen to people. And when you think you have something wrong, you have to be an advocate for yourself. You have to, really, speak up. And my mother-in-law was of that generation. And we'd say, well, what about blah, blah, blah? Well, I didn't ask the doctor. Like they didn't ask any questions.
No,
Blah, 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 blah.
But also, I think that
They never got good answers, yes.
people dismiss the size of the lizard. It could be a little lizard or a big lizard, and no one said to you, is that really a problem or is that mishigas?
We're going to get to Alice then Lynn. Ellen, we're talking about the quote at the top of page 31 about, when they ask him about, about the story of the lizard and the American couple who left, and he goes back in and it's a 5-foot lizard. Alice, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important in our discussion to get to the last line of the story where he says, he's in front of this group, which is what he seems to be doing. That's what he does. He does these book talks. But he says, probably, what do the people see when they look at me? Probably a lizard. And from the smile slowly spreading across their faces, this lizard is a lot smaller and more sociable than they expected. So I think it does say, for me, that was saying that maybe people have these thoughts in their mind about Jews. Probably most of these people in New Caledonia have not met a Jew before. And I think this is showing that, oh, you know what? I'm a person like anybody else. I have my issues. I have, and I had an experience like that when I was a teenager. I was at a Northwestern program, and my roommate, I can't even remember what town it was. She's from a small town in Ohio. She'd never met a Jew. So I really think it was like, oh, you're a teenage girl like anybody else. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I think there are ideas that people have who maybe haven't been exposed to Jews or to Blacks or to indigenous, whatever group, minority group you want to say. But then it's like you have to get to know people to really know, if there's somebody you should fear or hate or anything like that.
Yeah, I didn't talk about, again, in customer service when, yes, the lizard is 5 feet long, or you go into the classroom and everyone's sitting there, not that they sit like this. But the lizard is that tiny gecko. I have Lynn, Evie, Sue, Wellick, Barb.
Mary and I were just comparing quotes that we underlined, and on page 34, I think this is getting to the heart of the question when he says, then the questions begin, is this truth or phobia? And I put also paranoia. Are those anti-Semitic events insinuating themselves into your mind because you anticipate them? And then he talks about this. Okay, so here's my response. And I'm as we're talking, I'm thinking this. Depending on your experiences in life, you can say, this is just, I'm being paranoid, or this is really not anti-Semitic. Or he cites several different examples of really blatant anti-Semitism. So I don't think that's a phobia. I think because of his background and his parents being Holocaust survivors, he has a real fear. And he is, I don't think he's paranoid here. The question is, when does it cross the line? When do you take this personally as a Jewish person, making assumptions about these people? We were in a restaurant in Austria, and we could not get the waitress to come to our table.
Do you think she thought?
So this is what we're thinking. Is she anti-Semitic or is she anti-American?
Oh, God. So in Hebrew, we say gamze v'gamze, both.
Both. I mean, and it was blatant because the other people next to us were all being served.
Yeah.
So
I don't know how she'd know you were Jewish. It's got to be American.
well, we spoke in clear English, so it could have been the
American.
American.
Wait. So I have, right. I Evie, then Sue Wellick, then Barb, then Mary. Evie, go. I'm going to unmute you.
Okay. We have these built-in pressures
businesses that we don't know about. And I'm going to do the flip side of this. We were at Thanksgiving, and one of my granddaughters, who's 16 and just started working, was talking about a job that she just started. And she kept talking about this one is Jewish and that, positively. But I was embarrassed by that in terms of having to repeat who's what and who's what. That was my own sensitivity. And maybe it stems to, I was reading in the book about, I think it was one of the other stories, and every name had a J with it. And
Oh,
we had
gee.
and we had a friend who would always talk about when we were in a group, and a number of us would get together for weekends and talk about the J's here. Are there any? It took me a while until I even knew what she was talking about. So that kind of prejudice bothers me a lot. And the other thing that I wanted to say is the lizards that are in our minds. And I came across an expression that I even have on my bulletin board, and I wrote it at the name as just an iPod, was just an IPOD, interesting point of view, which kind of, when I think about that, it kind of takes me out of that bubble where I'm in, making all these assumptions and getting into that whole rabbit hole of what I'm thinking and so on and so forth. So I think it's so hard to kind of step out of what we're thinking or how we're listening to that and realize that, yeah, we might have these things going on in our minds, but is it really, but it's so hard to do that. So those are just my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Barb.
Okay, the last,
Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. No, it's Sue.
sorry.
And I wrote it down, for God's. Sue, go ahead.
Well, I was listening to what Alice had to say and talking about the very last part of this story, when he says, maybe I'm even the first Jew that they've ever seen. And we had an experience like that when my husband and I were first living in England in a little village about 60 miles from London. And our landlady was visiting with me in our little hut. And she was looking at my wedding album and said, what's he got on his head? And I told her about wearing a yarmulke and that we're Jewish, and that is a tradition among Jews. She said, "You are? I've never seen one of those before." One of those?
Right,
Like,
she meant Jews, not a
right, but
keepo.
we're like I was a thing, but like we were things, not people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it was,
Step right up.
but she obviously, she didn't have an ounce of anti-Semitism in her because she always was extremely warm and friendly. And years later, we took our grandchildren there to meet her. And but she just had no idea what a Jew
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
None at all.
Yeah. Barb, Mary, and then Roberta.
Okay, so you were talking about
Real life.
you were talking about several of the experiences that he had that were obvious
Right.
anti-Semitism.
Yes.
In this last paragraph here, he's talking in the first person. This is his perception, the other side of the coin, the paranoia side of the coin. We don't know what these people think. We don't even know if they care whether he's an Israeli or a Jew. He's just saying, I can't decipher their expressions, but they look very focused. I'm the first Israeli writer to come to Valley. Maybe even the first Israeli, I may be the first Jew. And so this is what he's putting on himself. This is what he's going through his mind as he's experiencing this, but we don't know what the audience is really thinking.
The only thing is that he does have, excuse me for responding, talks about this existential experience he lives through daily living in Israel. And that wouldn't it be great to live in this joyous, beautiful environment, but he doesn't live that way. So his whole psyche has been formed by where he lives.
Yeah. And we're going to get to that in one hot
So,
minute.
the cynicism, if he floats between cynicism and optimism
Yeah.
in the
Yep,
story.
yep, yep.
So
Yeah.
All right, Mary, then Roberta.
Okay, I'm not gonna play this sort of present, what we're living through right now.
Yeah.
because I think that's really
A
important.
lot. Yeah.
Okay, he says, I've collected a number of genuine anti-Semitic experiences that can't be explained away by mistake or by a mistaken understanding. I think if you listen to people like Jonathan Goldblatt, or we just listened to Brett Stevens, who said, when it happens, don't question if it's anti-Semitic or not. You need to act as a Jew. And you need to act on it. Don't excuse it away. Don't think it's your paranoia. Don't think they don't understand. He goes, they can come back to you if you do it in a correct way and say, I didn't know that, or whatever, but you cannot turn your head anymore. And Jonathan Goldblatt made a very big thing is we have to change our whole perspective as Jews. We have to talk about education. We have to talk about educating people because they don't know. They don't know what they're saying. They don't understand it. And we have, no, they do and they don't. They're
They
people.
do, that's bull,
Hey, I grew up in the South where no one had met a Jew, and they
Yeah.
said things, they didn't understand the history. They don't
Yeah.
understand you. It's educating them because they haven't gotten that education in high school. They haven't gotten it. They've never had any Jewish education. They've never had, I have a friend that volunteered at the Holocaust Museum in DC. She said the happiest moment is when a busload of people, of kids from Oklahoma would walk in and they knew nothing. Zero. And, I think that is a really important thing. You don't turn your head. And we were in Poland, Hungary, and the Hungarian Jews community will not allow a Holocaust museum to be built. And there is a reason, and it's because the government will not say they were wrong and allow it, what happened with the Nazis. They will not admit their complexity, that they have suffered as much or more than the Jews. That is their attitude. And the Jewish community says, until there is understanding of our history and who we are, we cannot go along with the government trying to form the view of Jews. And I think that's really important. I mean, I found very strident.
yeah,
I think that we have to be aware and we have to act. We might be paranoid, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the point is, you can't turn your head and excuse it away.
Thank you. Roberta, and then Judy, then Merle. Roberta. Wait, I'll unmute.
Judy, okay.
Go ahead.
I think there's two things. Number one, the quote lizard that we all perceive really depends on who's perceiving it. They bring with them all their experiences, perceptions, and in identifying the size of the lizard. On the other hand, I think the lizard that we assume we need to see their point of view. Just like I can't see, but whoever just spoke, I think they were trying to say we need to understand where they're coming from and where their perceptions are and correct them or inform them. I just have one example. This morning I was listening to the news and there was a shooting in Manhattan.
I heard that.
Okay. Now the first reaction was, you feel sorry for him, but my reaction was, oh my God, I bet you they're going to find out that the person that shot him was denied health care in some situation.
The person who was shot was the CEO of United Healthcare.
Oh,
Yeah.
Downtown
Manhattan. Downtown Manhattan. And the police said it was targeted. Okay, let Roberta, one more, finish up, go ahead.
Oh, and so what I'm saying is that is a good example of understanding where this lizard is coming from, because I think they're going to find out that United Healthcare denied someone that he loved in his family health benefits and died.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Okay, Judy.
Okay. I realize I'm a racist. It became obvious
On page 35, it says, even today, every other word of the German language puts me on the defensive. And I have to tell you, my great grandfather came from a family of 12. 10 were murdered. I don't have very much sympathy for Germany. Then my cousin marries a German woman. Okay, I've known her all my life, or most of my life. Very nice. I'm happy he's happy. I'm happy they have a family. She was divorced and he had a little girl. It was great. That's wonderful. And then she decided to apply for German citizenship. I freaked out. I can't. I realize I'm a bad person for saying that someone, just because they're where they were born, I don't like, but I realize I'm not a very good person. So you don't have to pretend you all know me because it's embarrassing to realize I'm a racist.
Listen, we could, that's a whole nother thing. Merle, Meryl, then, Alice, and then,
We'll talk about
Yeah.
it.
wait. Let me unmute you.
It's going to be friendship.
Okay, go ahead, Merle.
Around 2013, my son-in-law was working in Sarasota at Sarasota Opera, and my daughter and son-in-law lived there for a few years while he worked for Sarasota Opera. And every time I went to visit them, there were lizards outside their house, little ones. And at first I was scared. I said, do they bite? What are these things? They said, oh, no, they're benign little lizards. Don't worry. And I actually got used to them and I sort of looked for them in a kind of positive way when I came to visit. Now I was thinking about this man and he says, from their smiles when they're listening to him speak, this lizard is a lot smaller and more sociable than they expected. So that's the first step, to see the lizard, the Jewish man, and then get to know him and see that he's a good person. And I thought this was a very positive ending, that as Jews become friends with people who are outside their circle, their religion, it does make positive steps forward. So I thought the ending of the story was very good.
Yeah. Alice.
Yeah, this goes to this story, but kind of the whole section and the whole book. I think I'm not saying we can't talk about being Jewish and the Holocaust and all that, but I also think we really have to start to zero in on he's Israeli. I don't think any of us are, we might have relatives that have made Aliyah, but I'm saying is, I don't think any of us have lived in Israel for a long, I've been to Israel, but I haven't lived there. And I think so much of what he says, I feel that's why I'm enjoying this so much. I feel like I'm getting so much of an Israeli point of view on things, even of the Holocaust. Of everything. Because it's beyond being Jewish, it's being Israeli. I think that's really important.
It's a great point.
Okay, Abby. Unmute. I'll unmute you. All right, go ahead.
Okay, we have so many lizards within Judaism. We look at each other from whatever branch we're at as the other as crazy or lazy or hazy or whatever. It's just we're not cohesive. I think we're becoming more so. I think there's more of a blending than there was maybe a generation ago. But I know as somebody who has kind of gone the realm of starting out with an Orthodox day school and then becoming not conservative, but Reconstructionist and then conservative, and then like just all over the place, and just feeling being the other within our own community. So I don't know if we can just point to the whole J word. I think we have all kind of fractions within ourselves that we have to look at and see and appreciate the similarities. The first time that I ever went to a Reform congregation, it was a friend in high school, and it was so different for me, and she thought that I was so different, and meanwhile, her daughter has become so ultra and goes around the world blowing her shofar and giving wonderful Torah sessions and so forth. So within this one person, it's become full circle. But I just think we have to be careful what we ourselves are judging.
I want to go to page 33, Defender of the People. And from the day you're born in Israel, you've been taught that what happened in Europe over the past few centuries was nothing but a series of persecutions, pogroms. And I want to bring up, and talking about Israelis, is that in Israel, so the Hebrew for diaspora is galut. And I listened to, her name is Rachel Korazim. She's amazing. If you ever can hear her talk, she used to do education at Yad Vashem. But she was talking to a bunch of Israelis who are coming to America. And she said, you know, what were the names of your Hebrew teachers? You know, Batya, Tzipora. And then she said, and what did they tell you about Galut? Galut is terrible. You know, that's just terrible. And then she said, but where do you go shopping on vacation? And they call it Chutz La'aretz, outside of the land. They don't call it Galut. Galut is bad. But they all, you know, go shopping and vacation. And we don't have those sensibilities. And this is a Hebrew thing. But when she said that to me, it was, you know, mind blowing, because Galut has it has a visceral reaction for me of living in the Galut, and you know, that's not good, blah blah blah. But Chutz La'aretz, you know, outside of the land, that is fun. Lynn.
Somebody else was before me.
Okay.
Who was before me?
Mm.
No one. Okay. I think adding to the fact that he's Israeli and that he's a child of survivors. I mean, he has baggage that he's taking with him all the time that he's traveling. And I get this sense, and I'm reading Kantika and talking about refugees. I feel like he feels he's a refugee wherever he goes. That he's a stranger in a strange land. And that perception, his perceptions are going to be colored by all of that. And that's what we're getting from him. But I would say, you know, even now, when something bad happens, everybody says, was he Jewish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My family hates when I do that. I cannot help
So
myself.
why do we do that?
Because we don't want that profiling, and that we don't want them to say, oh, look what the Jews did. Bernie Madoff, Boski, Boski, all those guys. Judy.
You know, we were out to dinner with some people that live in Florida now, over the weekend. And she was explaining that in her condo area, there's one particular area that the Israelis, Orthodox Israelis, live for the amount of time they're allowed to leave the country. They don't allow the women to swim with the men. They don't, it's really, it is Orthodox. And she said, it makes such a bad name for all the other Jews in this particular area. And I understand her point. We're so sensitive right now. We're just particularly sensitive. And I understood what she was trying to say.
Right, in the middle of page 35. But as they say, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.
Right, exactly.
And, you know, again, in these fraught times, when one thing after another comes up, you just have to shake yourself. And again, you know, when October 7th happened, I immediately said, because we were all together, it was Simchat Torah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and all the clergy's here, I'm like, okay, we got to send out a letter. And, you know, one person said, well, it doesn't look that bad. I go, it's bad. This is going to be bad. And then the other clergy person said, okay, we'll send out a letter. Then I wrote him and I'm like, send the letter. And we did send something, and it was Shabbat and a Chag, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, when things happen, You just got your quarterly. And, both rabbis talked about the election. And they don't, I don't think, they didn't coordinate that, trust me. You always wonder, and I obviously I have a lot of colleagues and friends who are rabbis, and one rabbi friend was talking to her friend in the building and said, well, on Friday night after the election, I should do something for the Democrats. And the colleague goes, no, that we have Republicans. There's some people who are happy about the election. Like we tread a very fine line here, but yeah, I got off. Okay. Yes, Mary.
I want to go back to a comment that was made earlier. Requiem for Dreams talks about.
Yes, let's move to that.
It's an extension of the story before in
Yes,
essence,
yes.
but it talks about being a refugee or not, and what you do about it and where you put your money and all that kind of thing, having a bundle. Well, you said, so my daughter-in-law comes from a Holocaust family, and she, before the Trump election, got citizenship for her daughter and herself in Germany. And there is a really
I
big
know.
reason. That is, they have
They go to
access to
school. University.
No, it has nothing to do with that. Because their daughter has to be able to pass an exam to be that she's totally fluent to get the free end of university. It's not, you have to take a huge exam, and it's very hard to get in and get it, particularly if you can't do that. She's not going to have the language background, it's to be able to go to the European Union. Not necessarily Germany, but it's access to the European Union, because they feel, and my daughter-in-law totally feels, that she has a little of that paranoid. She really doesn't trust what's going to happen in the next 4 years with Trump. She's seen it coming for many years. I mean, it's been a long time. And she wants to protect her
She
family.
wants an escape
And my son
clause.
laughs and goes, I'm going to be left behind to be.
My grandchildren as well. My son-in-law, they weren't, they got out before the Holocaust, but they were made reparations to his family. And I have to ask Lital, but I think they're applying for citizenship for my kids. And if someone, and I'm okay with that, but if someone had told
Where?
Germany.
Germany,
But
but
my
then you have
cousin-
access to European Union, and you can
Yeah.
go anywhere. You can
Oh.
go to, and it's safe.
It's
And
all
the
for
problem
my
is right now,
son-in-law.
no place is that safe and right now. But
Right.
the point is that it's a bumper. You know what? You are still a refugee in a sense. You
Right.
really never feel. My daughter-in-law said something really interesting to me many 4 or 5 years ago. She goes, when Ben walks out of our house, and he rounds the corner, and there's a big something that kind of looks like a tank, whatever, he sees an ice cream truck. I walk around the corner and I see the tank. The point is that you have this mentality,
Yeah.
he has it, and it's passed down. Her grandparents, they went to Switzerland, one set of grandparents, they stayed there. The other grandparents came here and they made it, but they left everything behind. It was
I
very
think-
difficult. But the point is, she's had that, she's
Right.
passed down. She's just wary.
So that is generational trauma.
My
Right.
cousin did it 10 years ago, before there was,
Wow.
I leave America.
Right.
She did it before then.
Yeah.
I was not here.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that if someone had said this to me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I would be like, what?
That's how I.
And now it's like, oh,
Now anybody knows.
Lynn,
Have you been to Germany?
No.
All right, let me tell you about Germany.
real loud.
Let me tell you about Germany. Germany
Bye-bye.
has done
Goodbye.
more to show repentance for what happened in the Holocaust. They have little copper plaques in front of each house where somebody was taken. They have flags all over of the Nuremberg laws to educate people what happened. They built a fabulous Holocaust
It's
museum.
phenomenal.
I mean, we were shocked. I mean, we
I
were in
would have been shocked
Berlin,
too.
go
I
to
didn't
Berlin.
know.
I mean, you would be really pleasantly surprised to see how far they have come in
it's-
trying to repent. And that is that generation, this generation of Germans. I can't speak for them, but I have not run into any people with German background who
We're anti-Semitic.
Yes. One other thing I want to say, my first and only encounter with anti-Semitism was at college. And it was somebody in a class, and I think I've told this story before. We were reading a Clifford Odets play, and in it, the grandfather, that's a Jewish family, jumps off the roof and commits suicide. And somebody in the back raises his hand and he said, you know, I wish every Jew would jump off a building and commit suicide.
Oh, my God.
So the Jewish people in the class looked at each other. And we, after class, we went up to the professor who was Jewish. And we said, what can we do? No, what do we do? He said, the only thing you can do is to be a good Jew. He didn't say a good Jew, but he said, in your acts, the way you behave in society, that's the only counter that you have is yourself. You're not going to change anybody's mind by telling them something, but by the Jewish belief in deed over creed is your actions. So that's what I took with me out of college.
Yeah.
Remember that.
Did anyone ever confront?
Yes.
Real loud. Did anyone ever confront this person?
No, I think we were scared.
Yeah.
My first experience with
I was-
anti-Semitism was in high school.
Was in high school?
In high school, I used to curl. I used to do curling with my dear friend
remember.
every Sunday. And at
Exmoor.
Exmoor.
Yeah.
And one day, I was curling. They called me to the front desk. Said, you have to call your mother and have you picked up. I said, is there a problem? They said, yes, you're Jewish. Oh, my girlfriend, and I will tell you, my girlfriend died a few years ago. We had gone out for lunch every 6 months. She said to me, the most horrifying moment of my life was when you were taken out of action.
Wow.
She was remembered it all these years. I haven't forgotten it.
All right, Mary, 1 second. Sandy. You need to
Well,
unmute.
Yeah, I experienced, in growing up in Chicago, I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism in elementary school. Often my mother had to walk me to school because it was so bad. Kids would grab you and say, you killed Christ, and they'd rip your clothes. And I was brought up in St. Mel's Parish on the west side of Chicago. But anyway, I put up with that. I learned how to just put up with that. And then it happened to my child when I lived on the south side of Chicago. And I came home and heard what this group of girls had done to my daughter. I reacted to everything I had put up with as a child. I found out where this girl lived. I went to her. I couldn't call them because their number was not in the phone book. I learned because the father was a policeman. And one of her friends had held my daughter's hands behind her back while the others beat her up, blew smoke in her face. This was in 8th grade. So I picked myself up, found out where this girl lived, went to the house, asked the mother to see Pamela. That was her name. And she said, yeah, Pamela's here. What's this about? I said, well, I'd like to talk to her and in front of you. So she called her daughter up from the rec room and she came up and I said, you don't know me, Pamela, do you? And she said, no. I said, well, I understand what you did to my daughter today with your girlfriends. And I want to tell you something, darling. You're a pretty girl, but when I get hold of you, if you ever touch my daughter again or say anything about her being Jewish, I will take your pretty little face, mash it into the ground so that you now look like a bowl of mashed potatoes.
That's the
I
example.
have no idea where that came from in me. It was from years of taking the anti-Semitism in my neighborhood, and I wasn't going to let my kids do it. Okay.
Thank you.
That
Yeah,
stuck with
yeah.
me all those years, but
Yeah,
I want to
yeah,
tell you something. Years later, many years later, after I returned from living in Israel, it was about 1987, my granddaughter was being treated this way by a group of Catholic girls. And my daughter and we went to the priest and we said, we want a meeting and we want these kids that were tormenting my granddaughter brought before. We go to the church. He sets up a meeting. It's on a Saturday that he sets it up for. We go there and the boys aren't there. They were all boys that were calling her a dirty Jew. This was in Niles. And the priest said, well, I didn't want to embarrass them. They're here, but they're in another room. And I'm willing to let her go in there and they'll say they're sorry. And we said, we're not going to let her go in there alone. Her father, who happens to be Catholic, and her adopted brother, my daughter adopted a child besides her own 2 natural kids. He's Catholic and Philippine. They said they'd go with her. They went in there, but we saw nothing really was accomplished. He wouldn't embarrass these boys by bringing them in. And when I left, I walked past the priest. He smelled so of liquor. He was so inebriated.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
I'm talking, but it
That's
doesn't
okay.
end.
I'm
It
dying to know
doesn't
what the
end.
mother said.
This is three generations, and it doesn't end. There are still people doing that today to us.
Joyce, did you have a comment then, Evie and Merle?
Well, I think I've told this story before. It didn't happen directly to me, but I was witness and I couldn't stay quiet. It was at a restaurant in Evanston. We were waiting to be served, to be seated. And all of a sudden we saw a couple leaving and a waiter was chasing them out.
Oh, she
What happened? She froze.
And
She's coming.
have to find out what happened.
She probably doesn't realize.
Okay, right, so I just, we'll come back to her, Merle, then Abby.
yes,
Okay. When I was in 4th grade, I
turn
didn't know anything about.
and
Oh, she went off. Okay, go.
When I was in 4th grade, I didn't know anything about the Holocaust or anything about anti-Semitism. I just didn't know anything. And my teacher brought these 2 German children to me and said, you're going to teach them English by reading to them. And I think I got very interested in this and I helped them learn English. And later I became an ESL teacher, I think it started then. But the point was, I didn't know anything. They were nice. I became friends with a German girl. And I was thinking in one of these stories at the end, he's on the beach with his friend and Etgar Keret is on the beach with his friend and they're flirting with these girls and they find out the girls are from Dusseldorf. And right away he's like, I feel uncomfortable. They're German. So I think as Jews, we also have to be so careful about not becoming prejudiced against people who never even lived through the Holocaust, never knew anything about it, never were a part of it. So we have to protect ourselves from becoming like that, where we walk around with these terrible prejudices. And the whole thing about Judenraus and Jedenraus, I mean,
Oh, that was also fascinating.
very funny, because I had to take German once before a test. I had to take a reading exam in German. And I really didn't particularly want to take German because of my association with the Holocaust and everything else. But anyway, I took it. But most people don't want to take German anymore. And he didn't know German either. So, I mean, we just have to not become like them. That's what I wanted to say.
Agreed. Joyce, you froze halfway through the story.
Okay, I'll finish it quickly. I spoke with the manager. I told him what I heard, and he asked if I could identify the waiter. And I said, yes, I can. I said, I don't think you need to fire him. I said, but I think he needs to be educated. I said, that's unacceptable language in any situation. And he
Yeah.
actually thanked me for bringing it to his attention.
Okay, so that's hopeful. I have Evie then Lynn. Evie.
Yeah, I think that I've really tried to have blinders on, not consciously, but unconsciously, and think, oh, it doesn't really exist anymore, and so on and so forth. But my two granddaughters, who are they're both at New Trier now, but in junior high about a year and a half ago, they were taunted terribly, and they really had to get the authorities involved because it kept going on and on. They had to get the parents in school and so forth. I haven't heard anything now the last year or so since they were both in high school, but for a while it was very difficult, right in our own backyard.
Yeah, Lynn.
On page 47, I think this is maybe
Real loud. Your teacher
warning to
voice.
us. We, as someone said before, we become lizards as well. When I try to reconstruct those bedtime stories my father told me years ago, I realized that beyond their fascinating plots, they were meant to teach me something about the almost desperate human need to find good in the least likely places. Something about the desire not to beautify reality, but to persist in searching for an angle that would put ugliness in a better light and create affection and empathy for every wart and wrinkle on its scarred face. And here in Sicily, 63 years after my father left it, as I face a few dozen pairs of riveted eyes and a lot of empty plastic chairs, the mission suddenly seems more possible than ever. And that's where his optimism comes in. I think we've turned into some really depressed people. I'm listening to this voice today. It sounds pretty cynical and overwhelmingly oppressive. All we can do is have control over ourselves and try not to become lizards ourselves and jump right to the stereotypical image of, oh, they must. And I'll tell you, I am now into, oh, he must be a Trumper. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
just, which is horrible. It's a horrible thing to say.
Yeah.
But
Well, the people
that's
in this room think it's horrible.
I know.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't think
That's the-
so.
well,
But
anyway.
I shouldn't generalize like that.
Yeah.
But there's certain behaviors of people, and so what do we do about that? That's the question.
I think that's a good, Beverly and then Joyce. Beverly, are you?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. My life has had the most tremendous challenge ever because I moved from downtown and I live at the V, which is not primarily Jewish. So number one, I've never lived with this many people in my life, nor have I ever lived with among so many non-Jews in my life. And my life, even though I have had anti-Semitic things happen, in my lifetime, this is a whole different ballgame. I'm there. I'm an intelligent person. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Jew. And I think there are people, a segment of people who live at the V who live their whole life in Glenview or Kenilworth. They belong to, so many of them, the same church, the same country clubs. They're none of which accept Jews. And so here I am, very Jewish, in this new life navigating this new life and probably am a lizard, you know, to a lot of these people. However, my goal was to be very, very friendly, very
Confrontational.
thank you, not confrontational. And like something happened and the friend at dinner said, she said, I really wanted to say something. She is not Jewish. I said, I don't think you should. We're both Democrats. We're both bright people. She's not Jewish. I am. And I said, I wouldn't say anything. And I said to her, what I said to you, I'm a Democrat, I'm Jewish. I'm not going there. I am not confronting anybody about anything. They all can be whoever they want to be. I want to live the rest of my life in this environment. And I have to say, concluding, and what a challenge this has been for me, but it's the best decision I ever made. Because
So I just want you to know, I want my mom to look at the V, and she went to visit a friend there. She goes, too Jewish.
too Jewish, not at all.
I'm gonna
Oh my
tell her
God.
this conversation. Just too Jewish. Now,
Not
my
at
mother's from
all.
Bristol. Yeah, I know. All right. Joyce.
I
Wait. Yeah.
also live in a condo. It used to be much more Jewish than it is now. And my husband and I are very fortunate in I have never had so many non-Jewish friends.
Yeah, I know.
Fortunately, most of them are Democrats. However,
That makes a difference
however,
if you're a Jewish.
we have found ourselves listening to the other side. And I think in this day and age, what we have to do now is listen, not confront, not attack, but just sit back and listen and be the stronger, more adult person in the room. And as hard as it is, very often just bite your tongue, but at least listen. I think that is the first step in terms of getting along.
Yeah, I think both Beverly and Joyce, what you said and answering Lynn is that we have a long 4 years ahead of us.
Yeah.
And if not longer, and we do have to listen, and we can't just, it's half of our country. And it's not going to be easy, and it's not, and we're in a liberal
Bubble.
a liberal Jewish, what's the word? Entitled, community, and it's very hard. Ellen, did you?
Well, what I was going to say,
Fill out.
I think the election and reading these stories, and we all know that anti-Semitism has existed for a long, long time. But I think we're in a world today where the most positive thing we can do is to try to find common ground.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's very difficult. And there are classes on how to, especially when somebody's so opposed, whether it's, an anti-Semitic thing or a political thing. But I think we need to become better at that. It's not easy. And when you're so different or so opposite feeling from someone, it's, seemingly impossible, but we have to keep working at it.
Agreed, Judy.
I think that's very wise, but I will tell you, I'm not willing to be quiet. I was quiet for 78
I'm not
years.
saying we should be quiet.
I have a gay son. I have multi-generation, my grandchildren are both black and white. My daughter married a black man. I can't be quiet.
We shouldn't be quiet
I have to be more vocal. I have to figure out a way to do it
without
Successfully.
alienating the other side.
successfully,
Exactly,
but
exactly.
I can't keep quiet anymore. I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm not, I agree.
Mary.
Mary.
Okay. Okay, I think that you can't lecture people. I think you can't get in their face.
Yeah.
What I said at the beginning is educate. That means listening from where they're coming from and really listening and saying, you know what? I see where you're coming from, but maybe you need to understand that Jews were there thousands of years ago. Or maybe you need to understand there have been 4 or 5 peace treaties that have been trying to be hammered out by the Israelis, and Palestinians turned it, the Hamas, whatever,
Yeah.
turned.
Not the Palestinians, Hamas and the PLO.
Right, or the PLO turned them down, and they got on their knees and said, please, we need to do something. On the other hand, you also have to say to them, Israel isn't perfect. They make their mistakes. So there's an educational process in finding and listening and finding the inroads to clarify misinformation. I think that's really important, and not being willing to ignore. I think that what you said, you stay quiet and you want to pretend it's okay. That's what he
figure out
says
a way to
about his
do it.
father. He goes to Sicily, okay,
Yeah.
with the mafia.
Yeah.
And he says here, I try to imagine my father coming here after the war, 19 years old at the time, to this place that, despite its many troubles and dark alleys, projects such as the sense of peace, projects a sense of peace and tranquility. So what does he do? For the first time in his adult life, his father, he doesn't have to be afraid or hide the fact that he's a Jew. He doesn't hide it, but he doesn't confront the darkness. He's careful about it, and he tries to find peace where he can.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where
I
we're at.
wanted to visit both of those places.
I was just-
Lynn,
Well, we just came back from Sicily, so I'll talk to you about it. I'm listening to Judy.
Yeah.
The lizard is not just Judaism. The lizard is any big 5-foot problem that confronts anyone, whether it's gender equality, whether it's race, whatever that huge issue is.
yeah.
And sitting and trying to listen and not say anything is monumental.
Yeah, I
I
can't.
mean, there are entrenched beliefs. I mean, this project 2025 is the most, I don't even know how to explain it. It's the biggest lizard on earth.
Barb,
I wonder, coming from the perspective of the story where the lizard, where he imagines himself as the lizard is something that's very threatening to the majority of the people. Why? And I think we have to figure out why the majority finds the lizard so threatening.
Well, that's what I said when you said, why didn't you confront the guy in the classroom? And I said, we were scared. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Well, but I think
People find these topics, these
But I think
lizards,
the majority,
Yeah.
the other guy is threatened by our small existence.
That's
What-
true.
I mean, so why is that?
I think we have to, right, you have to point out the size of the lizard. You have to find out the size of the lizard. And that just resonated with me. So, because you can only imagine the stories we hear in the office of, blah, 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 blah. Then sometimes it is a 5-foot lizard and sometimes it's a little gecko. We meet again on December 18th. There's only 4 stories in chapter 3, year 3, year 3. I will continue to send out my emails, and what a great conversation today. It just so resonated with me. And I think as I've said this a million times, other people have said it, it's a great group, and to be able to just talk to one another and have our feelings validated, I think and that's an important part of, we have to validate what people feel.
I want to answer.
Lynn, and last comment, Lynn.
I want to answer to you people. So the guy in the back of the room added to all of the Jews should jump off the roof. So then he said, when I was in the army, see, you have to look at their history. These New York Jews, okay? So here's again an assumption, the stereotype. were the most obnoxious guys I ever known in my life. And he goes on and talks about these guys. So now he has generalized to the guys in the army, to all the Jews should jump off roofs. So I guess what we need to do, and I asked Joyce Schrager's husband this question. I said, what happened? He was a law professor and head of the law school, John Marshall, I think. What happens when you hear some kid say something outlandish about something? How do you deal with it? So the first thing I do is say, where did you get your information?
That's good.
Show me why you feel the way you do.
It's a great,
And that's,
It opens it up.
it opens it up.
going where they are. Yeah,
Yes.
it's understanding
Where are
where
you
they are
coming
and
from? What do you
then
mean by
correcting in a
that?
nice
What do you
way
mean by
some
that?
misinformation.
Yes, exactly.
Then they open up TikTok and take it from there.
Yeah.
All right, it's good seeing everyone. This Sunday is Sue Benjamin and Cantor J. O'Brien. We really encourage you to come in person. Although it will be streamed on the live streaming, it will not be recorded for
Because of copyright.
copyright. Thank you. I don't know why I was done. So 9:30 Lox and Bagels, 10 o'clock program.
Will there be an email with the live stream available?
Yeah, okay, so here's the thing about live stream. You just go to mymacomb.org, worship live stream, but it'll be in mymacomb, at mymacomb, the email that comes out on Thursday. It'll be in that.
Thank you.
Ellen?
After December 18th, which I cannot come to, are we meeting in January?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
I'll.
yeah.
I'll wish you all in the.
Okay, I'll send out the
We have to pick a book.
calendar.
Are you-
Well, yes, we need to pick a book, but we still have a little bit of this.
Okay.
Okay,
Year 3.
thank you.
Yeah, parts.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.